You're not failing at this. This is a video about grief that doesn't run on a schedule. The kind you're still carrying months later, when everyone around you assumes you're over it. We'll find out where that weight actually comes from, why the usual advice makes it worse, and what to do instead on the mornings it shows up early. There's a version of you still standing in a doorway you walked out of months ago, still setting a place at a table for someone who isn't coming. And somewhere in there, you decided that meant something in you was broken. But maybe the problem was never that you can't let go. Maybe you've been picturing what letting go looks like all wrong. Start with where the weight is actually coming from, because it isn't where you think. The person is gone. The door is closed. The conversation ended a long time ago. None of those things are still happening. And yet the weight is, every morning, right on schedule. Which means whatever is producing it isn't out there anymore. It's in here. An emperor worked this out almost 2,000 years ago, writing at night in a notebook he never meant anyone to read. Marcus Aurelius had every external thing a person could want, and none of the things that actually protect you. He buried most of his children. He ruled through a plague. He fought wars he never chose. And what he kept returning to, page after page, was this: the world will do what it does, and the mind is the one room you still get to keep in order. He wasn't talking about battlefields when he wrote that. He was talking about the war that starts afterward, the quiet one, the one nobody sees. But here is where almost everyone misreads him, and it's exactly why his advice feels useless at 3 in the morning. When people hear that the mind is a retreat you can withdraw into, they hear something he never said. They hear, stop feeling it, get a grip, go somewhere quiet inside your own head, and if the ache follows you in there, that's a personal failure. That reading has done an enormous amount of quiet damage, because it turns grief into a test you're failing. Now you're not just sad, you're sad and ashamed of being sad, and the shame is heavier than the grief ever was. But look at what he actually wrote. He never said the retreat was empty. He never promised you'd find nothing waiting for you in there. He said it was quieter, untroubled. And he meant something very precise by that. Not that the pain stops arriving, but that it stops running the place. Those are completely different claims. One of them asks you to stop the weather. The other only asks you to decide whether you're going to stand out in it all day. Which raises the harder question, and it's the one nobody seems to answer. If you're not supposed to stop feeling it, and you're not supposed to let it run your whole life either, then what exactly are you meant to do with it on an ordinary Tuesday morning? A man who had been born into slavery gave the most practical answer anyone has managed. Epictetus spent his early life as someone else's property, and he came out of it holding a single organizing idea. At every moment, some things are up to you, and some are not. And very nearly all human misery comes from mixing up which is which. Whether the loss happened, not up to you. Whether it hurts this morning, not up to you either. He was clear about that. He never pretended a wise person feels nothing. What is up to you is narrower than you would like, and far more useful than you would expect. It is what you do in the 10 minutes after the ache arrives. Whether you get out of the bed, whether you call someone, whether you spend the whole day arguing with a fact that has already happened. And notice the shape of that list. Every single thing on it is something you have to decide again tomorrow. Not once, not permanently, daily. Which sounds exhausting, right up until you see the one thing it quietly rules out. And that is the piece that finally makes the daily part bearable. Here is what it rules out. The idea that you were ever supposed to finish. We talk about letting go as though it were a door. One side is holding on, the other side is free, and the entire task is getting through. Which means every morning the ache comes back. You read it as proof that you never made it through at all. Do a few months of that, and you stop grieving the loss and start grieving your own progress. But nothing about a person works that way. You don't decide once to be patient, or honest, or kind. You decide it, and then the situation comes back around, and you decide it again. And the deciding again is not evidence that the first time didn't count. It is what having a value actually consists of. Letting go is the same kind of thing. It was never one decision. It is the same decision made again. Every morning the old ache shows up early. And each time you make it, that is not you failing to have let go. That is the letting go happening in the only form it has ever taken. Someone put this more plainly than I can in a letter to a friend who had just lost somebody. Seneca wrote that letter to a friend who had just lost someone, and who was apologizing for how long it was taking him. 2,000 years, and it is still the same apology. Seneca didn't tell him to stop. He told him where it ends up, not in forgetting, but in the day the memory arrives and doesn't cut. So here is the actual answer, if you came looking for one. Letting go was never going to feel like a finish line, because it was never a finish line. It isn't a decision you get right or wrong once. It is a practice. And every morning you choose it again, even quietly, even without noticing, is the letting go actually happening. Which means the thing you have been reading as failure is the process working. Needing to decide it again today doesn't mean you never decided it. It means you are still here, still choosing, still early. So if there is still a version of you standing in that doorway, still setting a place at that table, you are not failing at this. The ground underneath you never went anywhere. And one morning, without announcing itself, you will walk through that door and simply keep walking. If this gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. There's a new reflection here every week. And be gentle with yourself today.